After my sister lied about me, Dad threw out my things and my kids and said, "Get out of my house." My sister laughed. "Good luck surviving, loser." We just walked away. What they didn't know, the air in my father's house always smelled the same. Lemon polish, old paper, and a faint, lingering trace of my mother's rose-scented perfume, a ghost he refused to exorcise from the upholstery. It was the 10th anniversary of her passing, a day that was supposed to be about quiet remembrance, a fragile truce in our family's Cold War. My two children, Liam and Maya, walked ahead of me, their small hands clasped together, their steps unnaturally quiet, as if they, too, could sense the oppressive weight in that house. I had taught them to be respectful here, to be invisible. It was a survival skill. But as soon as I saw my sister Chloe's car in the driveway, a sleek, arrogant silver convertible that was a recent gift from Dad, I knew survival wasn't on the agenda today. Ambush was. I saw her face through the bay window as we approached the porch. She was standing beside Dad, a triumphant little smirk playing on her lips. It was the same smirk she'd had in 3rd grade when she told our teacher I'd copied her homework, the same one she wore when she told our parents I was the one who broke Mom's favorite vase. It was the smirk of a predator who knew the trap was set and the prey was walking right into it. A cold dread, sharp and familiar, coiled in my stomach. I stopped on the walkway, my hand instinctively going to my pocket, my fingers finding the smooth glass of my phone. I unlocked it, navigated to the voice recorder app, and hit the red button. I did it without thinking, a reflex born from years of her casual, venomous lies. I needed proof. I needed a witness, even if it was just a digital one. "Anna." My father's voice was flat, devoid of any warmth as he opened the door before I could even ring the bell. He didn't look at his grandchildren. His eyes, the same pale blue as my own, were fixed on me, and they were glacial. "We need to talk." "Dad, what's wrong?" I asked, ushering the children inside. "Liam, Maya, why don't you go to the sunroom? Grandma's books are still there." They scurried away, relieved to escape the tension. Chloe glided forward, her movements silky and self-satisfied. "Don't bother trying to act innocent, Anna. It's over." She stood beside Dad, a united front. She was the dutiful daughter, the saintly caretaker. I was the prodigal, the problem, the perpetual disappointment. It was a narrative she had been carefully crafting for years. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. My father held up a sheaf of papers. They were bank statements. His bank statements. "Chloe showed me everything," he said, his voice laced with a disgust so profound it felt like a physical blow. "How could you? After everything I've done for you? Stealing from me? Draining my accounts? For what? For your habits?" The accusation hung in the air, thick and poisonous. My habits. He meant my drinking. The struggle I had fought and bled and clawed my way out of 5 years ago. I had been sober for 1,826 days. I had rebuilt my life from ashes. For my children, for myself. And here he was, throwing it in my face as if it were yesterday. Chloe, of course, was the one who kept that wound fresh, always reminding him of my past fragility, painting my hard-won sobriety as a temporary, precarious state. "Dad, that's not true," I said, my throat tight. "I haven't touched your money. I would never. Let me see those statements." "No," he snapped, pulling them away. "I've seen enough. Chloe's name is on the transfers. She was trying to protect the money, moving it to her account before you could take the rest." It was so absurd, so diabolically twisted, that for a moment I couldn't speak. She hadn't stolen the money. She had rescued it from me. She had framed me for a crime she was in the middle of committing. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. I looked at her, and her eyes glittered with malicious glee. She had him. She had won. "He's right, Anna," she said, her voice dripping with false pity. "We were so worried. We saw the withdrawals and just assumed the worst. Your history, well, you can't blame us." "My history?" I finally found my voice, and it was shaking with rage. "I am 5 years sober, Chloe. You know that. You were at my chip ceremony. Were you, though?" she asked softly, a perfectly aimed dagger. "Or was that just another performance?" My father flinched, his face hardening. That was all it took. One whisper of doubt, and his faith in me, already paper-thin, disintegrated. "I've made my decision," he said, his tone final. He wouldn't look at me. He looked at the wall behind me, at the portrait of my mother, his dead wife, as if seeking her approval for this monstrous act. "I've packed your things, and the children's things. They're on the lawn. I want you out of my house. Now." The words didn't register at first. They were just sounds. Packed my things? The few items I kept in my old bedroom for when the kids and I stayed over? The box of my mother's jewelry she had left for me? He couldn't mean that. He couldn't. But then I looked past him, through the open door, and saw them. Black, industrial-sized trash bags sitting on the perfectly manicured lawn, dewing in the late afternoon sun. Not boxes, not suitcases. Trash bags. My life, my children's lives, reduced to garbage. A wave of nausea washed over me. I felt the floor tilt beneath my feet. "Dad, you can't be serious," I whispered. "Those are my kids in there. Your grandchildren. They'd be better off away from you," he said, the words coming out clipped and brutal. He was just parroting her. I could hear Chloe's poison in every syllable. "I'll make sure they're taken care of once you're out of the picture. But for now, you all need to go. I can't have a thief under my roof." I stood there, frozen in a state of pure, unadulterated shock. The betrayal was so absolute, so complete, it was like a physical void had opened up inside me. This was my father, the man who had taught me to ride a bike, who had held my hand at my mother's funeral, and he was throwing me away, throwing his own grandchildren away, based on the transparent lies of my viper of a sister. I turned, my movements stiff and robotic, and walked back to the sunroom. Liam and Maya looked up from a picture book, their faces full of confusion. "Come on, sweethearts," I said, my voice miraculously even. "We have to go." "But we just got here," Liam protested. I know, plans changed. Grab your jackets. As I led them past the foyer, my father stood like a statue, his face a mask of cold fury. Chloe, however, followed us to the door, unable to resist twisting the knife. As I stepped onto the porch, the humiliation washing over me at the sight of those black bags, she leaned close, her voice a triumphant hiss meant only for me. Good luck surviving, loser, she laughed, a low, cruel sound. You have nothing. No money, no family. Who's going to help you now? I didn't look at her. I couldn't. I just focused on my children's small backs as they walked toward my beat-up sedan. I opened the car doors for them, my hands fumbling with the handles. I was on autopilot, my mind a screaming vortex of pain and disbelief. We just walked away. That's what it looked like. A defeated woman and her children, cast out with the trash. But what they didn't know, what neither my cold, cruel father nor my sociopathic sister knew, was that this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. They didn't know about the phone in my pocket, still recording every venomous word. They didn't know about my Uncle Robert, my mother's brother, who I had texted 15 minutes before I arrived, telling him I had a bad feeling and asking him to come by. They didn't know that for the past year, I had been documenting every single instance of Chloe's manipulation, every passive-aggressive comment, every discrepancy in the family finances I could find. They thought they were kicking out a victim. They had no idea they had just unleashed a survivor, and they certainly had no idea I was about to burn their world to the ground. As I buckled Maya into her car seat, a silver SUV pulled up to the curb. Uncle Robert got out, his face a thundercloud of concern. He was a retired police detective, a man who could read a situation in a heartbeat. He took in the scene, me, pale and trembling, the children, confused and scared, the black bags on the lawn, and Chloe, standing on the porch like a queen surveying her conquest. Anna, what in God's name is going on? He boomed, his voice carrying across the lawn. Chloe's smirk faltered. This was not part of her plan. Uncle Robert was the one person in the family immune to her charms and her father's influence. He had always seen her for what she was. It's a private family matter, Robert, my father said, appearing at the door. It stopped being private when you put my niece's belongings on the lawn in trash bags, Robert shot back, his detective's glare sweeping over them. He walked over to me. Get in my car, Anna, you and the kids. We'll get your things later. He looked at my father. And you and I are going to have a conversation, Frank. A long one. There's nothing to talk about, my father said, his voice less certain now. I didn't wait to hear the rest. I got my kids out of my car and into the warm, safe interior of my uncle's. As he drove away, I looked back at the house I grew up in. Chloe was pulling my father back inside, her hand on his arm, her face a mask of fury. The trap had been sprung, but the wrong animal had been caught. The recording in my pocket felt like a warm, heavy stone. It was my truth. It was my weapon, and I was finally ready to use it. The drive to Uncle Robert's house was a blur of silent tears. I cried without making a sound, the grief and rage a physical pressure behind my eyes. Liam and Maya were quiet in the back seat, sensing the gravity of the moment. When we arrived, my Aunt Sarah enveloped us in a hug that felt like coming home. She took the children to the kitchen for milk and cookies, her calm presence a balm on their frayed nerves. Uncle Robert led me to his study. He poured me a glass of water and sat opposite me in his worn leather armchair. All right, Annie, he said, using my childhood nickname. Tell me everything, from the beginning. And I did. I told him about Chloe's years of subtle sabotage, the constant whispers to Dad about my sobriety, my parenting, my finances. I told him how she'd isolated him, becoming the sole gatekeeper of his life after Mom died. I told him about the suspicious loans and gifts that had been flowing from Dad's accounts to hers. And then I took out my phone. They don't know I recorded it, I said, my voice hoarse. All of it. I hit play. The tinny sound of my father's cold accusations filled the quiet room. Then came Chloe's saccharine, poisonous voice, feigning concern. We listened to the whole 10-minute exchange, culminating in her final, gloating dismissal on the porch. When she said, "Good luck surviving, loser," Robert's jaw tightened, his knuckles white where he gripped the arms of his chair. He listened to the entire recording without a word. When it was finished, he let out a long, slow breath. "That's not just cruelty, Annie," he said, his voice grim. "That's a confession. She admitted to manipulating him, to taking the money. She laid it all out. This is evidence. What do I do with it?" I asked, feeling a sliver of hope for the first time that day. "First thing tomorrow, we're going to see a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. My old friend Evelyn Reed. She's a bulldog, specializes in estate litigation and financial elder abuse. Chloe wanted a war. We're going to give her one." That night, I lay awake in the guest room, listening to the steady breathing of my children sleeping in the bed beside me. They were safe. That was all that mattered. The shock was beginning to wear off, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. Chloe and my father had underestimated me. They saw me as the fragile, broken version of myself from 5 years ago. They had no idea who I had become in the crucible of recovery. I had learned to be honest, to be accountable, to be resilient. I had learned to fight for my life, one day at a time. This was just another fight, the biggest one yet. The next morning, I felt a strange sense of clarity. The ambiguity of my relationship with my father and sister was gone. There were no more gray areas, no more hoping for a breakthrough or a return to a non-existent golden past. There were only battle lines. Uncle Robert had already called Evelyn Reed. Her office was a sleek, modern space downtown, all glass and steel, a world away from the suffocating floral wallpaper of my father's house. Evelyn was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and an even sharper suit. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Robert tells me your sister has been a busy little bee," she said, gesturing for us to sit. I spent the next hour laying out the entire story, starting from my mother's death and the subtle shift in family dynamics. I explained how Chloe had leveraged my my past alcoholism to position herself as the responsible one, slowly and methodically eroding my father's trust in me. I gave her the binder I had started a year ago. It was a simple 3-ring binder, but it was my secret weapon. Inside, I had documented everything. Every phone call where Chloe made a snide remark about my sobriety. Every family event I was conveniently forgotten to be invited to. Every time Dad quoted a lie Chloe had told him about me. I had printed out emails and text messages. I had made notes of dates, times, and conversations. Evelyn flipped through the binder, her expression unreadable. Then I played her the recording. She listened intently, her head cocked to one side. When it was over, she looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something that looked like admiration in her eyes. "Well," she said, leaning back in her chair, "your sister is both a monster and an idiot. This recording is a gift. Her arrogance is our greatest asset. So, we have a case?" I asked, my heart pounding. "A case? My dear, we have a symphony," Evelyn said with a thin smile. "We have defamation. We have a clear case for tortious interference with expectancy of inheritance. And most importantly, we have a textbook case for financial elder abuse. Your sister has systematically isolated your father and manipulated him for financial gain. The recording proves intent. Your binder establishes a pattern of behavior. This is not just about getting your share of the family trust back, Anna. This is about bringing what she did into the light." She laid out the strategy. The first step was to file a petition for an emergency conservatorship over my father's estate, citing undue influence and potential financial exploitation by Chloe. This would freeze all his assets and prevent her from draining any more of his money. The second step was to file a civil suit against Chloe directly. "This is going to get ugly," Evelyn warned me. "They will attack you. They will use your past against you in the most vicious ways imaginable. They will try to paint you as an unstable, greedy, vengeful addict. You need to be prepared for that." "I'm prepared," I said, and I meant it. What more could they do to me? They had already thrown me and my children out like garbage. They had already dealt me the deepest cut. Everything that came next would just be superficial wounds. We left Evelyn's office with a clear plan of action. Uncle Robert was quiet on the drive back to his house. "Finally," he said, "your mother would be so proud of you, Annie. She always knew how strong you were, stronger than all of us." His words were a comfort, but they also brought a fresh wave of grief. My mother would have never let this happen. She was the family's center of gravity, the only one who could manage Chloe's manipulative tendencies and my father's emotional weakness. When she died, the center gave way, and we all flew apart. The next few weeks were a blur of legal paperwork and emotional turmoil. Evelyn was true to her word. She filed the petitions, and the court immediately issued a temporary freeze on my father's assets pending a hearing. The reaction was instantaneous. I received a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. It was my father's lawyer, a man named Mr. Davies, who had been handling our family's affairs for decades. His tone was condescending and paternalistic. "Anna, I think you need to seriously reconsider this course of action," he said. "You're making some very serious, very hurtful allegations against your family. Your father is devastated. This isn't the way to resolve things. With all due respect, Mr. Davies," I said, my voice cold. "My father and sister made it very clear how they resolve things when they put my children's belongings in trash bags on the lawn. All further communication can go through my attorney, Evelyn Reed." I hung up the phone, my hand shaking. The next assault came from the family. My Aunt Carol, my father's sister, called me, her voice a mixture of panic and accusation. "Anna, what are you doing?" Chloe called me. She's in tears. "She said you've gone completely off the rails, that you're trying to have your father declared incompetent. You're tearing this family apart." "He threw me out, Aunt Carol," I said, my patience wearing thin. "He threw out his grandchildren because of Chloe's lies." "There are two sides to every story," she said primly, "and from what I hear, you haven't been well. Maybe you should focus on your recovery instead of all this ugliness." It was the family mantra. Smooth things over, don't cause a scene, pretend the ugliness doesn't exist. I had lived by those rules my whole life. Not anymore. "Thank you for your concern, Carol," I said, and hung up. I blocked her number. I blocked every number that wasn't in my immediate support system. I was building a fortress, and there was no room for enablers. My support system was small but mighty. Uncle Robert and Aunt Sarah were my rocks. My sponsor, a tough-as-nails woman named Maria, reminded me daily that my sobriety was my superpower, not my shame. "They want you to feel weak because of it," she said. "Don't you let them. You look that disease in the eye every single day and you win. That makes you the strongest person in any room you walk into." And then there were my children. They were the reason I was fighting. I found a small furnished apartment to rent, using money Uncle Robert insisted on lending me. It was tiny, but it was ours. It was safe. I spent my days organizing my evidence for Evelyn and my evenings building Lego castles and reading bedtime stories. I compartmentalized. During the day, I was a warrior, preparing for battle. At night, I was just mom, a protector of peaceful dreams. The character assassination Evelyn had warned me about began in earnest. In their response to our petition, their lawyer filed a motion filled with the most vile, twisted half-truths. They submitted a declaration from Chloe, painting me as a violent and unstable drunk who had been terrorizing the family for years. They claimed I was relapsing, that my lawsuit was a desperate cash grab to fund my addiction. They even attached photos of me from my darkest days, photos Chloe had taken, not out of concern, but as ammunition. Reading it felt like being flayed alive. Every vulnerability, every mistake I had ever made, was laid bare and distorted into something monstrous. I sat in Evelyn's office, the papers shaking in my hand, and I felt a moment of pure despair. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was just just a mess. Maybe I should just give up. Evelyn let me sit with the feeling for a moment. Then she said calmly, "This is what they do, Anna. It's the playbook of every abuser. They can't defend their actions, so they attack the victim's credibility. This isn't about you. This is about their desperation. Now, let's take it apart, lie by lie." And we did. For every accusation, we had a counter. They claimed I was unstable. I provided a letter from my therapist of 2 years, attesting to my mental health and progress. They claimed I was relapsing. I submitted to voluntary, regular drug and alcohol testing and provided a sworn statement from my sponsor. They claimed I was a bad mother. I had school records, teacher recommendations, and a letter from my children's pediatrician. We built a wall of facts against their flood of fiction. The discovery process was grueling. We deposed Chloe first. I sat in the room, just a few feet away from her, as Evelyn questioned her under oath. She was the picture of composure, dressed in a soft pink sweater, looking like the victim. She repeated her lies with a straight face, her voice filled with sorrow. She cried, dabbing her eyes with a tissue, as she described her heartbreak over my supposed downfall. It was a masterful performance. But Evelyn was unfazed. She walked her through the timeline of the bank transfers, her questions precise and relentless. "So, on May 12th, the day after you had a fight with your sister, you transferred $50,000 from your father's primary checking account to your own personal savings account. Is that correct?" "I was protecting it," Chloe said, her voice trembling slightly. "I was afraid Anna would get to it." "And did you have your father's written permission for this transfer?" "He told me to do it. He trusts me." "So you have a document, an email, a text message from your father authorizing this specific transfer?" "It was a verbal agreement. We're family. We don't sign contracts." Evelyn made a note. "I see." She continued this line of questioning for hours, exposing dozens of transfers, all conveniently following a disagreement between me and my father, all lacking any formal documentation. Chloe's composure began to fray. Her story started to have holes. Her performance was wearing thin. The turning point came when Evelyn's private investigator found her. A woman named Sophia, who had been my mother's home health aide during the last year of her life. Sophia had quit abruptly, and we never knew why. The investigator tracked her down to a new life in another state. At first, she was reluctant to talk, but when she heard what had happened to me, she agreed to give a sworn affidavit. Her statement was devastating. She described how Chloe had constantly belittled and undermined me in front of our dying mother. She detailed how Chloe would listen in on my phone calls, then twist my words when relaying them to our parents. The reason Sophia had quit, she stated, was because she had witnessed Chloe withholding our mother's pain medication to make her more agitated, then blaming the agitation on a recent visit from me. She had confronted Chloe, and Chloe had threatened to ruin her career if she ever said a word. Reading Sophia's affidavit was like finding the final, missing piece of a horrifying puzzle. This wasn't new. This was a lifelong pattern of pathological jealousy and cruelty. Chloe hadn't just started trying to erase me from the family. She had been doing it for decades. When we deposed my father, it was the hardest day of my life. He sat across the table, looking older and more frail than I had ever seen him. He was accompanied by Chloe and their lawyer. He repeated the lies he had been fed, but his heart wasn't in it. His eyes were full of confusion and pain. He looked at me, and I could see the conflict warring within him. He wanted to believe her. He had to believe her, because the alternative, that he had been a fool, that he had been complicit in the abuse of his own child, was too terrible to contemplate. Evelyn was gentle with him, but firm. She asked him about his finances, about the transfers. He was vague, his memory suddenly foggy. "Chloe handles all of that," he kept repeating. "I trust my daughter." "Which one?" Evelyn asked quietly. He didn't have an answer. The hearing for the conservatorship was scheduled. It wouldn't be a full trial, but a hearing before a judge who would decide if there was enough evidence of undue influence to warrant appointing a neutral third party to manage my father's affairs. This was the main event. On the day of the hearing, I woke up with a sense of calm. I had done everything I could. I had gathered my truth, and now I was going to present it. I chose my outfit carefully. A simple, dark blue dress. Sobriety armor, Maria had called it. I looked professional, stable, and serious. In the courtroom, my father and sister sat at the opposing table. Chloe shot me a look of pure hatred. My father wouldn't look at me at all. Uncle Robert and Aunt Sarah sat in the gallery behind me, a silent wall of support. Evelyn began by laying out our case, her voice calm and methodical. She presented the bank records, the emails, my binder of documented incidents. She submitted Sophia's affidavit. The judge, a stern-looking woman with graying hair, read each document carefully, her expression unreadable. Then, Evelyn called me to the stand. My heart hammered against my ribs as I walked to the witness box and was sworn in. Their lawyer's cross-examination was brutal, just as Evelyn had predicted. He brought up my DUI from 7 years ago. He brought up the messy breakup that had triggered my spiral into drinking. He tried to paint me as a pathetic, grasping failure. I met his eyes and answered every question honestly. Yes, I was arrested for a DUI. It was the worst mistake of my life, and the wake-up call I needed to get sober. Yes, my life was a mess back then. I'm not proud of that person, but I am proud of the person I am today. I refused to be shamed. I owned my past. I had learned in recovery that secrets and shame were the enemy. My honesty seemed to unnerve him. His attacks weren't landing. Then came the final, climatic moment. Evelyn stood up for her redirect. "Anna," she said, her voice ringing through the silent courtroom, "on the day your father threw you out of his house, did you happen to record the conversation?" A flicker of panic crossed Chloe's face. Their lawyer shot to his feet. "Objection. Improper foundation, Your Honor. This alleged recording has not been authenticated. We have a certified forensic audio expert who has authenticated the file, the timestamp, and the lack of any tampering conferring, Your Honor, Evelyn said smoothly. His report is in the evidence binder, tab 14. The judge peered at the binder. Objection overruled. You may play the recording. Evelyn placed a small speaker on the table, and then she hit play. The sound of our voices filled the courtroom. My father's cold, dismissive tone, my own shocked, pleading one, Chloe's syrupy, false sympathy, and then the finale, the part recorded on the porch, when she thought no one but me could hear. Good luck surviving, loser, her voice sneered from the speaker, dripping with contempt. You have nothing. No money, no family. Who's going to help you now? A collective gasp went through the gallery. I chanced to look at the other table. Chloe was ashen, her mask of victimhood completely shattered, but it was my father's face that I will never forget. He was staring at Chloe, his mouth slightly agape. For the first time, he was hearing the raw, unvarnished malice in his favored daughter's voice. He was hearing the truth, and in his eyes, I saw not anger, but a look of utter, soul-crushing devastation. The carefully constructed world Chloe had built around him had just been demolished, and he was standing in the rubble. The rest of the hearing was a formality. The judge's ruling was swift and decisive. She granted our petition for a temporary conservatorship, appointing a neutral bank trust officer to oversee my father's estate. She issued a restraining order against Chloe, forbidding her from contacting my father or accessing any of his finances. She referred the case to the district attorney's office for a potential criminal investigation into financial elder abuse. We had won. It was a total, unequivocal victory. As we left the courtroom, my father tried to approach me. Anna, he started, his voice a broken whisper. I didn't know. Chloe grabbed his arm, her face a snarl of fury. Don't talk to her. She's a liar, she hissed, trying to pull him away, but he shook her off, his eyes still fixed on me. I looked at him, at the man who had discarded me so easily, and I felt nothing, not hatred, not even pity, just a vast, empty space where a daughter's love used to be. The damage was too deep, the betrayal too absolute. A legal ruling couldn't mend a shattered heart. I know you didn't, I said quietly. That was the whole point. I turned and walked away, my uncle and aunt on either side of me. I didn't look back. The aftermath was messy and protracted. The civil suit against Chloe ended in a settlement. Faced with the recording and the threat of a criminal trial, she agreed to pay back a significant portion of the money she had taken and to formally relinquish any claim to my mother's half of the estate, which was now legally mine. It wasn't everything she had stolen, but it was enough. It was a victory, but a bittersweet one. My father, through the court-appointed conservator, sent me a letter. It was a long, rambling apology, full of regret and self-pity. He begged me to see him, to let him see the children, to try and rebuild. I read it, folded it, and put it in a drawer. I didn't reply. Forgiveness was a concept I couldn't even begin to process yet. Maybe one day, but not today. Today was for healing. I used the settlement money to buy a small house in a town 2 hours away. It had a big backyard with an oak tree perfect for a swing. It was a quiet street, filled with the sounds of children laughing and birds singing. It was a world away from the suffocating silence of my father's house. I found a job working for a local nonprofit that helped women in recovery. My story, my past that Chloe had tried to use as a weapon against me, became my greatest strength. I could connect with these women, I could understand their struggles, and I could offer them a genuine, tangible hope that life could be rebuilt piece by piece. My life became small and simple and beautiful. It was centered around my children, my work, my sobriety, and my small circle of trusted friends. The raging storm of my family drama receded, becoming a distant, rumbling thunder that I could hear but no longer feel. I established permanent, non-negotiable boundaries. All communication from my father or sister had to go through Evelyn. There were no phone calls, no surprise visits. I had to protect my peace, and the peace of my children, with the ferocity of a mother bear. They had lost the privilege of being in our lives. Sometimes, in the quiet of the evening after the kids are asleep, I sit on my back porch and think about it all. I think about the look on my father's face in that courtroom. I think about the years of my life I spent trying to win the love of people who were incapable of giving it. The legal victory was important. It provided me with the means to start over. But the true victory wasn't the money or the court order. The true victory was walking away. It was choosing myself and my children over a toxic, broken family system. It was realizing that my worth was not determined by their approval. The scars are still there. They always will be. Betrayal by family carves deep, but they are no longer open wounds. They are reminders of a battle I fought and won. The other day, Liam came home with a drawing from school. It was a picture of our little house, with a smiling sun overhead. He had drawn me, himself, and Maya in the front yard, all holding hands. Underneath, he had written in his messy 7-year-old script, "My safe home." And I knew, in that moment, that I had done the right thing. I had broken the cycle. I had taken the garbage they had tried to bury me in and used it as fertilizer to grow a new life, a life of peace and strength and quiet, resilient joy. They thought they had left me with nothing. They were wrong. They had left me with everything that truly mattered. My journey of rebuilding wasn't just about the external things, like the house and the job. The deepest work was internal, a slow and painstaking process of untangling the knots of trauma and self-doubt that had been tied inside me for decades. My therapy sessions became my sanctuary, a place where I could safely dissect the complex emotions that the lawsuit had churned up. My therapist, a kind and insightful woman named Dr. Anya Sharma, helped me understand the dynamics of a narcissistic family system. She gave me the vocabulary for what I had experienced: gaslighting, triangulation, flying monkeys. Chloe was the narcissist, my father the primary enabler. My Aunt Carol and others were the flying monkeys, sent to do the narcissist's bidding and enforce the dysfunctional family narrative. Understanding the structure of the poison didn't make it less painful, but it did make it less personal. It wasn't that I was unlovable. It was that I was born into a sick system that required a scapegoat to function. For my entire life, I had been cast in that role. You didn't just win a lawsuit, Anna, Dr. Sharma told me one afternoon. You rejected the role you were assigned. You refused to be the scapegoat anymore. That is a revolutionary act in a family like yours, and it's why the system reacted so violently. You weren't just asking for your inheritance. You were dismantling their entire reality. Her words resonated deeply. I realized that the fight had never really been about the money. The money was just the symbol, the tangible representation of my worth, my birthright, the love and security my mother had intended for me. The fight was about my right to exist as I truly was, not as the flawed character Chloe had written for me. Maintaining my sobriety through the ordeal was my anchor. There were nights, especially after reading a particularly vile legal filing, when the old siren song of oblivion would whisper at the edges of my mind. The urge to numb the pain, to just for a few hours not feel the crushing weight of it all, was immense. In those moments, I would call Maria, my sponsor. Feel it, she would tell me, her voice firm but kind. Don't run from it. Sit with the rage, the grief, let it burn. That fire is clean. It's the booze that's dirty. The pain you feel now is the pain of healing. The pain you felt when you were drinking was the pain of decay. There's a difference. So I learned to sit with it. I would write in my journal, filling pages with angry, jagged script. I would go for long runs, pounding the pavement until my lungs burned and my mind was clear. I learned that emotional pain wouldn't kill me. I had survived my own self-destruction. I could certainly survive my family's. Each day I woke up sober was a victory, a testament to my own strength, a quiet act of defiance against the narrative they had tried to impose on me. The legal process dragged on in the background. Even after the settlement, there were loose ends. The district attorney's office did open an investigation into Chloe. It moved at a glacial pace, a frustrating dance of overworked prosecutors and clever defense attorneys. Evelyn warned me that a criminal conviction for financial elder abuse was notoriously difficult to secure, especially when the elder in question was not fully cooperative. My father, caught between his dawning horror and a lifetime of favoring Chloe, gave confusing and contradictory statements to the investigators, effectively muddying the waters. In the end, Chloe accepted a plea bargain. She pleaded no contest to a lesser charge of misdemeanor theft, paid a fine, and was sentenced to community service and probation. There was no jail time. Part of me was furious. It felt like a slap on the wrist for years of calculated cruelty and theft, but another, more weary part of me was relieved. It was over. The official, state-sanctioned battle was finished. I didn't have to see her in a courtroom again. Evelyn helped me put the final legal pieces in place. We created a trust for my children, ensuring that the money I had recovered was protected for their future. We drafted a new will for me, one that explicitly disinherited both my father and my sister, stating in clear, legally binding language the reasons why. It felt like a final, necessary act of severing. It wasn't about punishment, it was about protection. It was about ensuring that the chaos and toxicity of my family of origin would end with me. My relationship with Uncle Robert and Aunt Sarah deepened. They became the grandparents my children had lost. We spent holidays together, celebrated birthdays. They never once said, "I told you so," about Chloe or my father. They simply offered unwavering support and unconditional love. They were the family I chose, the family I built from the wreckage of the one I was born into. One day, about 2 years after the court case, an unexpected letter arrived. It wasn't from a lawyer. The handwriting was my father's, shaky and unfamiliar. I almost threw it away, but something made me open it. Inside was not a letter, but a photograph. It was a picture of my mother, Chloe, and me, taken when I was about 10 and Chloe was 12. We were on a beach, squinting in the sun. Mom had her arms around both of us, her smile radiant. For a moment, looking at that photo, I remembered a time before the poison had fully taken root, a time when we were just a family. On the back of the photo, my father had written just 3 words: "I am sorry." I stared at the photo for a long time. I felt a pang of the old grief, the longing for a family that never really was. I allowed myself to feel it, to mourn it, as Maria had taught me. I mourned the father he could have been, the sister I wished I'd had. Then, I put the photo in the box with his first letter. It was a part of my story, but it wasn't my whole story. It was a chapter I had finished. Life moved on, as it does. Liam developed a passion for science, his room filled with rock collections and model rockets. Maya discovered dance, twirling through the house with a grace that took my breath away. I watched them grow into confident, kind, and resilient human beings, and I knew I had given them the one thing I never had: a childhood free from fear and manipulation. Their home was a safe harbor, not a battlefield. I continued my work at the nonprofit and eventually went back to school online, earning a certificate in addiction counseling. Helping others find their way out of the darkness became my life's purpose. My own painful journey had become a map I could use to guide others. The scars they had given me had become my credentials. I never saw Chloe again. I heard through the family grapevine that she had moved out of state after her probation ended. She had burned too many bridges, her reputation in her hometown ruined by the public court records. I felt no satisfaction in this, only a distant, clinical sadness for a person so consumed by jealousy that she had destroyed her own life in an attempt to destroy mine. My father I saw one last time, unexpectedly. I was in a grocery store in my old town, having driven back to visit Uncle Robert, when I turned a corner and there he was, standing by the produce section. He looked ancient, a stooped and lonely old man. He saw me, and his eyes filled with a desperate desperate, hopeful plea. My first instinct was to turn and walk away, but then I looked at him, really looked at him, and I saw him not as the monster from my memory, but as a weak, flawed man who had made a terrible choice, a choice he would have to live with for the rest of his life. I had already won. I had my children, my sobriety, my peace. He had a big, empty house filled with ghosts and regret. I gave him a small, polite nod. It was not forgiveness. It was not an invitation. It was simply an acknowledgement that we were two separate people, living separate lives, our connection severed by a chasm of his own making. Then I turned my cart and walked down the aisle, my steps steady and sure. I didn't look back. As I drove home that evening, back to my safe little house and my happy children, a sense of profound peace settled over me. The story was finally over. The final ghost had been laid to rest. They had taken so much from me, my sense of safety, my trust, my childhood home. But in the end, I had gained something far more valuable. I had gained myself. I had learned that the strongest walls are not the ones we build to keep others out, but the ones we build inside ourselves, walls of self-respect, integrity, and an unshakable belief in our own truth. My father had told me to get out of his house, and in doing so, he had, quite accidentally, given me the greatest gift of my life, the freedom to finally build my own.